Hey, what's going on? Oh, let me unmute ourselves.
There
What's
we
going
are.
on, everybody? Welcome to the For Monday. If you are watching right now, shout us out in the comments. Go ahead and
We
say
are
something.
so glad you're here today. And if you are watching live on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We do not want you to miss a single For Monday with us, so make sure to do that. If you're listening to this later, make sure you're subscribed on wherever you listen to your podcast.
Yeah, we're releasing some really good content. No longer just the Sunday teaching, but now the For Monday podcast. We're sending out some reels. We're even on TikTok now. But the best way to get all that good content is on our YouTube channel. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. And whether you are a part of Canvas, community here in San Francisco, or you're tuning in from further away, we're just really glad you're here and excited that you'd be a part of this community.
And it's the first one in October.
First one in October. Very spooky. Very spooky because October is Halloween.
It's the
Come
most
on.
wonderful time of the year.
Yeah, for Jena. For people like Jena who apparently celebrate the devil's birthday.
That's me.
Not me. I'll be praying on Halloween, but Jena will be trick-or-treating. And Finley will be as well because she loves Halloween.
You're not going to stay home and pray.
No. I'll definitely go and trick-or-treat. No, we have no beef with Halloween. We love this time of year, the fall, Halloween, all that. If you love Halloween, let me know in the comments. It's always just such a good time. And so for Monday, what is this whole thing about? We've launched this podcast because we really want to create a space on Monday to dive deeper into some of the conversations happening here at Canvas, as well as to provide just some more application to those teachings. You only have so much time on a Sunday, and so we want to create this space outside of that to connect with those who are a part of Canvas, but also if you're not a part of Canvas, I think you'll also find this really helpful. You'll have deep conversation, some application, and we're probably going to talk about some nonsense all along the way. But we're excited about today. But before we jump into business, we got to talk about Halloween a little bit.
A little bit more?
What are you going to be for Halloween, Jena?
Oh, wow. You
What are you
really
gonna be?
threw that out there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everybody, but it's a surprise.
It's a surprise
I
what you're
can't
going to
give
be for
away the
Halloween.
surprise,
You're not
yeah.
even going to tell our friends on YouTube and Facebook
No.
what you're going to be for
No,
Halloween?
I came up with a really good idea this year.
Okay.
And I don't want to give the surprise away.
You don't want to give the surprise away. All
Don't
right.
say
Well,
it.
you heard it here, YouTube. Actually, you heard nothing here because she's not giving away the surprise, but we will eventually, I guess,
But
tell
if
you.
anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear it. Maybe something's better than what I thought of.
Yeah, what are y'all going to be for Halloween? Let us know in the comments, and maybe we'll put it up. We need some ideas. Eric said Halloween is my fave.
That's right, Eric.
I'm with you, man. Halloween is awesome. And Grandma Jean, so glad to be have you back with us again this week and seeing a couple more of you logging in and joining us here online. We're just talking about Halloween and what we're going to be for Halloween. Finley keeps going back and forth.
Oh, gosh.
One day she's like a rainbow unicorn. The next day she's Owlette. What are we at? Elsa, of course, has to make an
Well,
appearance.
this morning she did actually bring back up Judy Hopps from Zootopia,
Judy Hopps from Zootopia.
which I think is a pretty cool idea.
It's an interesting idea.
Nobody will know, but
I mean, we're officially at that point. And you're a parent. If you're a parent, you understand. There's those early years that you get to decide what your kid is for Halloween, but now we are beyond that, and she has an opinion, and not only an opinion, a very strong opinion on what she wants to be for Halloween.
Well,
It
and
reminds
she
me of
wants
someone else I know that has a strong opinion about Halloween.
she gets it from me.
Everything.
It's my fault. I don't feel bad.
For sure. So I think though there's a very critical question that we've got to ask this time of year, and I would love to hear your opinions on YouTube and Facebook land. And that is the movie Nightmare Before Christmas. I don't like musicals except this one. Nightmare Before Christmas is the only musical that I like. I love this movie. It's so good. So the question that I'm curious about is, because it's very divided in my social circles, is Nightmare Before Christmas a Halloween movie or is it a Christmas movie? What do you think,
I
Jenna?
think this could definitely start fights, but I think it's the perfect November movie.
What does that even mean?
That means it's the tail end of Halloween season, but you're transitioning into Christmas. So it's both.
Wow. If that wasn't the most peacemaking
I am a
answer
nine, and you're a nine.
I've ever heard in my life.
Okay, but I guess if I had to choose, I could only watch it in October or December. Ugh, I hate that I'm saying this, but I'd pick Christmas.
All right. So Jenna, in her heart of hearts, actually believes, when
I
she's not
do.
trying to make peace with everybody, believes it's a Christmas movie.
Yes. What about you?
I believe it's absolutely a Christmas movie, although I really want to watch it in October, but I can't allow myself.
I was going to say, because you asked, we have the book at home. You asked, where is it when we were going through our Halloween decorations?
I had a lapse in judgment. But go ahead and let us know in the comments. Do you believe Nightmare Before Christmas is a Christmas movie or a Halloween movie? We both think it's Christmas, but I think there could be a case made that it's a Halloween. It is a movie about Halloween Town and Jack Skellington and all that good stuff.
Well, and all of those characters and decorations come out in Disneyland in September.
It's true. And if you're anything like us, then the rhythms of your life are ultimately determined by what is happening at Disneyland.
So I think of strong cases made that it's a Halloween movie.
It's a Halloween movie. All right. Well, we will allow people to decide for themselves and enjoy the holiday season, regardless of where you land on the answer to that very, very important question. But hey, we are continuing a series of conversations around this topic of the future church. And if you're just tuning in or listening for the first time, if you're tuning into this later on the podcast, this series of conversations is really about asking this question: how can we build a future church that is worth passing on to the future generation? And here at Canvas, we're really wrestling with, like, in this historic moment in the human story on the other side of the pandemic, what does it look like to be the church? What does it look like to be the church in this sort of new world that we are finding ourselves in? And so the first week we talked a lot about the problems that we're seeing, and that is like over the past 20 years, seeing this decline in church engagement from every generation. I think a lot of times millennials get all the credit for this decline in the church, but every generation for the past 20 years has been in decline in regards to their church engagement. So we have a problem.
Yeah.
I was thinking about today, the church is this really interesting organization, because in any other organization or business, if they saw their numbers trending down and to the right, like they were going down, they would say there's something wrong here, that we have a problem, and they would adjust, they would change, they would do whatever they needed to take to turn things around.
Yeah.
But the church is this unique organization that a lot of times when we're in decline, like we've been in the last 20 years, we don't blame the product, we blame the people.
Yeah.
In any other industry, they would look at the product, not the people.
Yeah.
Like if a gym wasn't successful, they wouldn't say, well, people just like eating pizza, and so it's all their fault. They would change their strategy in order to get more people in the gym.
Yeah.
But the church is unique because we blame the people instead of the product.
Wow, that's
right. I was thinking about that when I was getting coffee. I was like, it's something that makes the church a really, really interesting organization. So we're looking at the last 20 years and looking at the problems and the stats and saying, hey, maybe something needs to change. Not the mission, just for those who are wondering, and not the mission. We're here about the good, to declare the good news of Jesus and to bring the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. Like, that's our mission.
Yeah.
But the method, maybe it's time that we explore other ways to be the church. So we started with the problem, and then yesterday I thought I really had fun with yesterday's talk.
It was an incredible message, and I was in Canvas Kids, so I didn't get to see it live, but thankfully I was able to watch it online. So if you haven't watched it yet, I would actually stop listening right now and go listen to it, because it's really good and so thought-provoking.
For sure. I thought it was thought-provoking as well. I'm just checking. I'm seeing some comments saying that our audio is a little funky. If you could describe what that means, that would be helpful. And I can try and troubleshoot our audio, but let me know if you can still hear me, although I'm not sure what you mean by funky. So let me know in the comments, and I can try and adjust the settings to the best of my ability. But yeah, I thought it was a really interesting talk. In fact, I don't know if I've ever heard a talk like the one that we had yesterday, where we talked about Web 3.0, the history of the internet, the metaverse, non-fungible tokens.
There were so many words in yesterday's sermon. I was like, what? I've never heard this.
Yeah, a lot of new words to be learned. And if you don't know those words, it's fine. You'll probably need to learn them in the future, because a large part of yesterday's talk was talking about all these things that are happening in our culture that are leading us into the future, and the church should probably pay attention. So week one was all about talking about the problem, whereas yesterday was talking about some projections on the future based on where culture is headed, based on where technology, the internet is headed, and how that is really reshaping our lives. But we framed the talk by looking at Acts chapter 1, Verses 6-7, this moment where Jesus rises from the dead and the disciples ask Jesus. In fact, the scriptures say that they kept asking Jesus. So they really wanted to know the answer to this question. And the answer to the question they were asking essentially was, how do we get back to normal? Like, how do we go back to the good old days of Israel when, we were a monarchy and we had a king and the king was blessed by God? And how do we go back when we were no longer under the thumb or rule of Rome? How do we go back? And it's such a relevant question because so many of us have been asking that same thing. How in the world do we get back to our regularly scheduled program after this massive disruption called COVID? And Jesus doesn't go along with it. He doesn't go along with it. Actually, instead of going along with it, what Jesus does is he shifts their thinking in 3 different ways. He shifts their thinking from a person to people first. He says that you are going to receive power, which would have been this really mind-blowing statement because it was believed that only one person, the priest, would experience the presence and power of God in one place once a year. But now Jesus was shifting their thinking from a person to people, saying that all people can now have access to the presence and power of God, which would have been mind-blowing to them. And then he shifts their thinking from consumer to creator. Instead of just going to the temple to consume what the priests have, arranged for them or prepared for them, they are called to be the temple, to go and be creators in this world, to be the new priests in this world. Jesus was shifting their thinking in a really deep and profound way. And then lastly, he was shifting their thinking from one place to all places. Instead of the Jewish temple being central to life and worship, Jesus was saying that what God is now doing will go outside the walls of the temple and to the corners of the earth, to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So Jesus was changing their way of thinking. And I said this yesterday, and I really think maybe we could talk about it for a second, is this idea that, before you can enter into a new way of living, you've got to embrace a new way of thinking. That you can't enter into a new way of living while remaining in the old way of thinking. What do you think?
I think this is so good and so challenging for me. I know I left yesterday after reading or listening to you explain these 3 shifts in Acts. It pumped me up. First of all, I'm like, yeah, they're going to be the witnesses. They're going out. They're going everywhere. They're no longer consumers. They're creators. It pumped me up hearing these 3 shifts that happened in Acts. But then afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, but where is God shifting my thinking right now?
Yeah.
Where am I holding on to what I think we should go back to? But instead, God is shifting something in me. Where is God shifting my thinking? Because it's easy to be like, wow, that was exciting for them. They had to go through some change and be open to that. But where is God doing that in my life? And I think that was a little challenging to stop and really think, okay, where's Jesus shifting my thinking right here, right now? And where am I trying to get back to instead of trusting that God is leading me somewhere brand new and has a new thing in store?
Yeah.
Because for my personality type, it is very easy for me to stay comfortable and to stick with what I know. It is very easy for me to do that.
Yeah.
Change is hard for me to adapt to. So this was a really big challenge after your message. And that was one of the things I wrote down right here in my book is, where is Jesus shifting my thinking? Am I open to that? Am I open to that?
So where do you think Jesus is shifting your thinking then? What is maybe in the last, year since reopening and we've sort of, I think, just been confronted that the world is different. Where is it that you're seeing maybe Jesus shifting your thinking the most? That might even be really difficult.
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like it's this, I think it kind of goes back to Acts. And one of the shifts for them is from consumers to creators. I think it's a little scary to understand that it's not just about the priest in the temple, but it's us. We are the creators, and we are not consuming, but we are called to be creators. And I think creating something new is both exciting and scary, and I feel like God is really challenging me to start thinking of things differently. The church differently. That's why we're having this Future Church series. He's challenging me in what I've always known and what I think works. And he's challenging me in my thinking to start start creating. Like, what could he have in store next for the church? So that's been a big challenge for me because I love what I've always known.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what we've always known and the safety of what we've always known, it's like this little comfort blanket,
Absolutely.
for us. And especially in the church world, if you were raised in the church world, this idea of the church changing, of it being different, or especially like we talked about last week, if you came from a good church experience, then it can be even easier to find comfort in what was.
Absolutely.
And feel uncomfortable or threatened even in asking what could be.
Yeah. Well, especially when we're tying in this talk of technology, because I know for me, I can I can visualize like, oh my gosh, we're never going to be with people in person again. It's all going to be on the metaverse or whatever. It's easy for me to go down that slippery slope when that's really not what we're talking about here. We still need to be with people.
Yeah. No one, and that's, and we're almost being intentionally redundant on that point because it's never either or, it's both and technology is not a replacement for community or in person. It can be a resource to the church, not to the church gathering in person, but not necessarily a replacement for it. But yeah, we talked about these three shifts, and I think we're seeing just sort of what I mentioned yesterday, a gray zone moment where we don't quite know where this is going to go and how this is going to land and what form it's going to take, but we know it's going somewhere.
Yeah.
We know it's not going backwards.
Yeah. It's
going forward, and it's probably been moving forward for a while now, but the pandemic forced all of us to sort of pause and get real honest, at least about the church.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people got really honest about the church during the pandemic, and what they discovered was, hey, I didn't go to the church for a year and my life is just as good.
Yeah.
That maybe it wasn't adding much value. I'm not saying that's everybody's story, but it's a lot of people's story. At least there's a lot of people that have not returned yet on the other side. And I think in a lot of ways, the pandemic forced us just to be really honest about the value that maybe the church brings or doesn't bring. And I think that's what we're wrestling with is like, okay, so how do we show up as a future church in a way that the future generation will actually want to be a part of? And so we took some time, and I just want to pause here and see. I mean, we worked on audio a little bit, and kudos to Jena for talking while I was trying to figure that out. But hopefully it's gotten better. Not sure what's going on, but hopefully you can at least understand us on some level.
And we'll fix it next week.
We will fix it next week. But stay tuned in, stay engaged, and let us know in the comments if it's any better. If not, my bad. We will sort it out and figure it out. But some people are like, this is why we can't rely on technology.
That's really funny.
You know what was really funny is yesterday, the second half of the message was talking through the history of the internet. And it was just super ironic because I was going to spend a good amount of time talking about the internet, and our internet died at Canvas all day yesterday and really threw a wrench in quite a few things before service. It was pretty funny and
it was
ironic.
Quite ironic.
But it also really showed how ingrained the internet is into our lives. I mean, can you imagine if the internet just shut down?
Oh man, even those few hours yesterday morning, I was just like, what are we going to do? We can't do it. How do I check in kids? How do I print labels?
Yeah. It really affects so much. And the internet is here to stay, and that's not shocking news to anybody. And we're all glad that it's here to stay because it actually has made the world better and more efficient in so many ways. But yesterday we talked about, the history of the internet. I'm not going to go through all of it because it's quite a bit. So,
but it was so interesting.
I thought it was interesting.
I never really noticed this, like 1.0, 2.0, like what?
There's a lot to it. The internet has a long history, and it has shaped how we live and interact with one another. And it's worth knowing where it came from because it does sort of, I think, paint a picture for what it could do as it moves forward and as it evolves. But we talked through the history of the internet. I'll put the link to the full teaching in the show notes so that you can watch that. I think you'll find it interesting as well. But essentially, the web started with Web 1.0 in 1969 in UCLA, and it has evolved ever since then. Web 1 was about content consumption. It was about finding information. So a lot of hyperlinks, non-complex websites, kind of like Craigslist, if you're familiar with that. And then it evolved to Web 2, which introduced social networking and ad-based marketing. And so Facebook and Twitter and Vine and TikTok, all these apps rose to the surface because Web 2 introduced us to this new thing called social networking and ad-based marketing. So as your Instagram feed just happens to know all the things that you've clicked on and liked and are interested in, it's because Web 2 introduced us to that.
Man, and they are good at it.
And they are good. It's creepy. Like I'll probably get some ads on my iPad or iPhone after this just based on what we're talking about here because they're listening.
They're always
listening. And so Web 2 introduced us to that, but then Web 3 is sort of taking shape right now. It's TBD on what it will actually become. It's a lot of wet cement, but there are 3 values to Web 3 that we talked about yesterday that we think are not only shaping the internet, but will shape culture and how people think. And those 3 values are democratization, innovation, and decentralization. Mm-hmm. Essentially, in Web 3, there's going to be a democratization of the internet where the middleman is eliminated. So big organizations like Facebook and Google we're going to be less dependent. Things are going to be less run through them because of something called the blockchain. And it should in turn create a more equitable internet and fair internet, but also innovation. In Web 3, there will be more opportunity than ever to innovate and to create and to actually own your content in a way that you couldn't in Web 2. And then a decentralization so that you can access the internet anywhere, everywhere, not having it filtered through just a couple, again, corporations or big entities. You will have control of your data and everything will be decentralized. Okay. And we're really seeing these 3 values, though, not just shaping the internet, but shaping culture. I mean, how often are people talking about democratization and the importance of democracy? We're seeing the great resignation in our culture right now. So people are innovating their purposes in their lives in really cool ways right now. But it feels like content creation is like the booming industry because innovation is key value. And then decentralization. We used to work in offices and now not so much. You know, the workplace has been decentralized. The church has been decentralized from one place on Sunday morning to many places. You used to just really have one pastor that you would listen to at your church, but now you can listen to any pastor that you want to listen to
across the world
and go to any church that you want to go to at any point. Why? Because the world has been decentralized. And so we really brought these 3 values to the surface and asked, what are the implications for the church? Because, and I referenced this quote yesterday, I think it's a really important quote by theologian Charles Finney, who said, you need to have the Bible in one hand and a map of the human mind in the other.
Wow.
So you need to have the Bible in one hand. You need to know the good news. You need to be able to teach the scriptures, but you also need to know where people are going. Mm-hmm. You need to know where people are going.
And how they're thinking currently.
And how they're thinking. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there's a lot of times people in the church world especially, we just like want people to think like us, but we're not willing to begin to think like them to meet them where they are.
And I think really when you were talking through this 1.0, 2.0, and now thinking towards 3.0, I think the temptation would be like, why does this matter? But you said it, like, this is where people are going. This is how they're thinking and how they're changing on their thought patterns. Like, of course we need to know that. How else are we going to reach them and build community?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we said it yesterday that we care about culture because we care about people. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really interesting line because sometimes I'll hear Christians say, hey, just, stick to the good news, stick to the gospel, just teach the scriptures as if culture is irrelevant in regards to us, taking the good news of Jesus to the corners of the earth. But I could not believe more that culture matters. Like culture is a fundamental part of our ability to actually show up in the world.
And I think that also brought up questions for me because so I grew up in the church. I grew up going to a Christian school my whole life. And I think the thing that challenges me in that is I was kind of always told that we need to be creating culture, the church. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's the question?
So I think the question is, if culture is already going somewhere one that we didn't really create, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm like, oh no, we need to fight culture. I feel like that's kind of the mindset that I had when I was younger and maybe was taught without really knowing
kind of that like us against the world sort of thing.
If we're not creating culture, we need to run from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anybody relate if you're listening right now? And by the way, Madison, thank you so much for letting us know that the sound is a little bit better. I'm glad a little bit better. We'll take it. But yeah, I would love to know in the comments, does anybody relate to that? Like living in a church culture that was like, we need to run from culture. We need to like shame culture. It's us against, like an us against them mentality.
And
I wonder.
Like, it came out in all aspects. Like what kind of music you listen to, what you read, what shows you watch. Yeah. Everything. Like we needed to stay in our Christian bubble and we'll create a Christian culture.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I first started following Jesus in high school. And one of the first things that I was told I needed to do was get rid of all my quote unquote secular music. And if you've been in the church world and you've like heard that word secular, you've heard that word over and over again as if like anything secular, get away from it, run away, burn your CDs. And I mean, I remember I went to a church camp one time with a Rolling Stones t-shirt on and they forced me to go back to my dorm and change my short.
How dare you?
Yeah, I think I scared the Holy Spirit out of the building. They saw my Rolling Stones shirt.
Example. Run from culture, but yet we have to know where culture is going.
If you want to actually be where people are.
Yeah.
Because wherever culture goes, people follow.
And I absolutely believe wherever culture is going, Jesus would meet them there.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Jesus was again and again condemned. And you look at who's condemning Jesus. What's ironic is it's typically religious people. Yeah. In fact, I'm trying to think if there's ever a time where someone who's not religious condemning Jesus, but it's mostly religious people condemning Jesus. And typically because he's at parties. Like Jesus was, I think, the life of the party. And how do I know Jesus was the life of the party? Because he kept getting invited to parties. You don't invite people to parties if they're boring or if they kill the party, right? Yeah. And so Jesus keeps getting invited to parties. He throws parties and he's with people that are sinners and outcasts and tax collectors, like the worst of the worst in Jesus' day. And Jesus never seemed to be afraid of being guilty by association.
Right.
He never seemed to be afraid of being guilty by association. So it's interesting, though, why people say, like, well, if you're in culture, then you obviously, like if you care about culture, then you're for the culture, and we need to sort of be against it.
Yeah.
Like, where did this come from?
Where it's this fear. It's like a really deep-rooted fear, I feel like, that people have. It's like, I don't know where that comes from. Maybe they have this sense that they're losing control or there's too much gray. It's easier to be in a black and white, easy to measure sort of state. But I feel like there's so much fear when it comes to taking account of where culture is going.
Yeah. No, it is fear. It is a balance, though, right? Because, I mean, we're in the world, but not of it.
Yeah. We are called to live differently.
Yeah, we're called to be different.
Absolutely.
And you think about the fears of syncretism, that we're just going to sync with culture. We're not going to look any different than anybody. And I share those fears. I think at times I do wonder, does the church look like an alternative community in the world? But there is a tension there. It's a gray zone where you kind of go like, hey, what does it look like to work with culture? But to shape culture, but to not be shaped by culture in the wrong ways, even though we're all being shaped by, it's a hard conversation, right?
The internet has shaped all of us.
Yeah.
Whether we want to admit it or not.
Well, absolutely. So it's funny when people are like, don't be shaped by culture, and they're tweeting it, and it's like, well, I mean, you're being shaped by Web 2 right there. So, I mean, we're all being shaped by on some level, but I think that is where it's like, yeah, there's a balance there of engaging culture without completely syncing with it.
Yeah. And I think that kind of ties back into, again, Acts and how, I mean, he really talks about it's by the Holy Spirit that we can do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has to be through the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and somebody's like, that just sounds like fluffy spirituality talk, but it's true. Like there's a reason we need to pray, to keep our hearts close to the Father's heart, to just be like, okay, God, like give me discernment to know like what is leveraging culture and then what is like being influenced by too deeply. Yeah. I like what Eric said here. He said, growing up in church, I was told I needed to work to change culture to make it more godly. And that's interesting, isn't it? Like, I mean, you see that a lot in America, right? This idea of like, we're going to take America back for God, as if like, America at one point in history was a theocracy, but it obviously wasn't. But it's like, it's this idea of working against culture instead of working with it. I guess that's what I'm for, though, and I felt like Jesus is for. Like it's how do we work with it? How do we work with the good, and how do we provide a better alternative for that which is bad? Because like technology brings a lot of good.
Absolutely. I mean, we can talk to anyone across the world. Imagine if the disciples knew they could reach somebody around the world without having to take a ship for weeks and weeks. And
Right.
weeks.
Technology can bring a lot of good, but on the other side of the coin, it can also introduce a lot of evil.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yes.
I mean, there's no doubt about that there is an evil and there's a dark side to technology. But and I think that's why when technology gets brought up in church, we get a little
squirmy.
because there is some obvious dark sides to it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know friends who aren't on any social media.
Right. And I mean, I even had a conversation yesterday with somebody that, I was so grateful for their honesty because they were saying like, what I'm wrestling with here is like, I'm not on social media. And the tension now is like, well, if this is where future's going and culture's going, should I engage it with like sort of a missional purpose, or am I okay to not engage it? Like, what do you think, Jenna?
That is a really good question, because I know for me, there's times where I have to take a break from Instagram. I mean, I'm very rarely on Facebook anymore, but so it is this kind of tug of war, and I feel like you have to be able to constantly take inventory of your heart and say, okay, what am I using this for? Am I getting dragged down by it right now, or am I leveraging it to build people up? Because I know I can spiral down and go down an Instagram rabbit hole where I could just compare myself to others. And that's when I know I need to stop and take a break from it. But there's other times where I'm like, I can use this to encourage people. And I think that's a really cool thing too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think and boundaries are so important with social media. I mean, just knowing what the limitations are, where and that might be different for everybody. So it's like for that person is like kind of saying, hey, I don't know, should I engage? Maybe not though. It's not. I don't think anyone's advocating that digital is going to be the only way you can like
talk to people
and follow Jesus and engage the church. Like that's not true. Again, resource, not a replacement.
Exactly.
So there may be some of you listening. They're like, I just don't want to get in on the social media train. I don't want to utilize that platform. And that's entirely okay. I think the conversation is less about social media and more so about us just saying, hey, what does the future church really look like? And whether you are on social media or not isn't as relevant because the future is.
Yeah.
The future is on social media. Millennials, Gen Z, like they are not like ditching their phones anytime soon. They're not leaving technology. And so I think it's on us to say, hey, what does it look like to have a balanced relationship with technology and utilize it as a tool and as a resource while staying away from that, which can be kind of unhealthy and toxic.
Definitely. And going back to the Web 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, I did have a question for you. So as I was listening to this and how 1.0 was really about information, 2.0 was really about socializing, do you see the parallels between the church and the web from when it was created? Because I kind of feel like I do. Like,
In what ways? What do you mean?
when 1.0 was a thing, the big thing, I kind of feel like churches were all about information. And I feel like we kind of slowly shifted to maybe like to more social, small groups became all the rage.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually think the pandemic forced churches to get Web 2.0 ready.
So they weren't 2.0 ready.
I mean, this is just my opinion for what it's worth. I don't know if the church was Web 2 ready, which is why you saw so many churches when the pandemic hit and everything went online, that so many churches were like, we're done. And so many churches closed or just really, really struggled because they had zero infrastructure, zero methodology, zero knowledge on how to go online. And this is 2020, mind you. Web 2 started at 2005.
It's a little behind. Well, and that makes me think like as this 3.0 comes into play, like what are we doing now?
Yeah, no, and that's I think a fear that I have a little bit is that maybe many churches are still a Web 1.0 church in a soon-to-be Web 3.0 world. And what does that mean? Because, I mean, you think about Web 1, which is ultimately driven by information and content consumption. I mean, what is most church experiences now?
Yeah.
It's the sermon.
It's
Come listen to the
consuming,
sermon. consume the program. There's one central voice, one central place, one central person that's delivering all the goods. And you just sort of like click the link and download, and that's sort of it. Like discipleship really became less about transformation and more about information. And that's a very Web 1 thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet I think now we live in a Web 3 world where people can get content wherever they want, whenever they want. They can list. There's 1,000 better communicators than me now on the internet that people can listen to. So now I think in the church, we're going, like content's not enough. I think for a long time, and even now for a lot of churches, content has been king. It's been all about the Sunday sermon, all about the catchy series, all about that. What is the content? I mean, you look at even a lot of church Instagrams now. Again, this isn't ragging on churches or anything like that. I hope that it doesn't come across that way. I just think we're just having an open conversation about it. Most church Instagrams or social media is really all arrows pointing towards Sunday.
Yeah.
It's really not as much about connection, but about how good was Sunday sermon. See you next Sunday for the sermon. Don't miss this sermon. It's really all about content. And I think Web 3 is going to be all about experience and connection.
Ooh, experience and connection. And that excites me. Like, this is the time to innovate. Experience and connection. How do we bring those into the church in a new and fresh way right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these are the questions that we should be asking. I would love to hear, if you're watching right now on Facebook or YouTube, what do you see in Web 3, from the metaverse to how social media is changing? I mean, anything we just talked about, content versus connection. Like, what do you guys see as Web 3's influence on the future of the church? What's something that excites you about the future? What's something that maybe scares you or makes you uncomfortable about the future? Go ahead and leave a comment, and we'd love to put it on the screen and talk about it a little bit. But I do think that Web 3 is going to introduce to us really immersive experiences, whether it be digital or physical. But I just think that anything that leads to connection will ultimately win.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I just think, like, right now, we don't have problem accessing content. If anything, we have problem filtering which content is true and which is not. That's probably another conversation. Yeah. So content is easy, but I think we're hungry for connection.
Yeah, real connection. Real connection,
which, I mean, I guess that's the thing. It's like, this is where it feels like we're going back on what we were saying. It's like, people are hungry for connection. And this is where I think the church should show up and shine in offering spaces of connection. But it's understanding that for a lot of people, connection is not just a physical thing. It can also be a digital connection as well. Yeah. I mean, all my single people on dating apps, you know what I'm talking about. Like, there can be connections made digitally.
Yeah. I mean, there's meetup groups you can find anywhere online. But it does end up to be in person sometimes.
Yep. All right, here's what Eric Dupree said. He said, I envision multi-threaded two-way communication, not like a Zoom call where only one person can talk at a time. Yeah, I think that'd be awesome, man. I think it'd be sweet. Yeah, I think that will be really interesting, is how do we make technology feel more conversational naturally, right? Because on Zoom at times
you're on mute.
Sorry, you go. No, you go. No, I'll get, and I don't really know how we solve that, but I think, like,
that is real though.
That struggle is real on Zoom. And so it'll be interesting to see how the communication online will evolve. Will evolve. And I think places like this, live podcasts, live streams, I think live streaming is going to be a really great platform for people to connect with others outside of maybe the normal venue that they would have connected. But any other thoughts that you have, Jenna?
Well, it just continually think, like, how do we apply this to Monday? Like, how do we bring this back into our lives every single day? Because I feel like it can feel a little overwhelming. Be like, oh, it's the future, so it's not here. But how do I live this out here and now? What does that mean?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. I mean, that was my fear yesterday doing the teaching. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I'm not overwhelming people, because it's a lot.
But it's so important that we lean into this and we continue talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we're at least paying attention. Now, I mean, do you need to be a Web3 expert? Do you need to only subscribe now to Web3 podcasts? And no, not necessarily, but it's like, I guess for me, I would just encourage those of you who find yourself stressed in this, like overwhelmed in this, is just maybe asking, what is it that I'm protecting? Where do I feel threatened? Like, I almost feel like that having a really honest conversation with yourself could be really helpful, because you may find that you're protecting something that will keep you from the something else that is even better. So there might be some things about the future that is changing and disrupting your normal and creating some sort of cognitive dissonance within you. But like, maybe pause long enough to just be like, what is really going on here? Yeah. And allow God into that space.
And I think that so ties into what I took away is, where is Jesus shifting my thinking? Mm-hmm. It comes back to that. Mm-hmm. Where am I being challenged, and where am I feeling threatened? Because Jesus may be shifting my thinking in that area.
Absolutely. Well, and I would say if Jesus is shifting your thinking, you probably will feel threatened at times.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine, what the disciples were thinking when they were like, let's go back to normal. And Jesus like, we're going back to anything but normal. Like,
literally, it's all changing.
It's all changing. So now, if anything, it put even more responsibility on them. It's like, hey, it's not just the priest. You're the priest. Yeah. Hey, it's not just one places. It's all places. Hey, you're not just a consumer. You're a creator. Like, Jesus really... he really just shifted their thinking in major, major ways. And I think that's where we're at right now, where we're in this space where it's like, it's scary, it's overwhelming, it's exciting. Yeah. We don't exactly know where it's going to land, but we sense something is shifting.
Yeah. And I think it's going back to them, and in that moment, because I would have been terrified, literally everything's changing. But he brings it back to the power of the Holy Spirit. That is going to be your anchor in the middle of all this changing world. It is the power of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. How are you tapping in and allowing the Holy Spirit to lead and guide you and anchor you in a shifting world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think, like, it's interesting to me that I'm seeing right now in the church sort of this new wave of charismatic Christianity, and not like rolling down the aisles and stuff that can be weird, but like, I'm seeing just this hunger for charismatic, like, not charismatic because there's too much baggage with that word. Just a hunger for like the power of God. Yeah. I guess that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of movements happening right now where there's an emphasis on prayer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, because I do think, like, we can read about it, we can talk about it, we can think about it, we can listen to podcasts about it. But like, if we're not spending time in God's presence saying, God, prepare my heart for the future, then you're not going to be ready. Yeah. Because there's more than just brain transformation that needs to happen. There's got to be like a heart transformation, not just learning where Web3 is going, but God, would you prepare my heart for this new world that we're entering into, that I could be a representation of you in a really helpful way in this world. And that is just waking up and saying, God, shape my heart a little bit more today. And that's why I think it's so important when you feel overwhelmed and you immediately want to like run back to that which makes you comfortable. Yeah. Just pausing and saying, God, I'm willing to lay even this down, but I need you to change my heart. Yeah. I need you to shape my heart. God's been doing that, I feel like, in us, as we reopen.
Mm-hmm. And how we really were trying to recreate what we thought we had before. Mm-hmm. And God's saying, I got something new. Mm-hmm. You would just let go long enough and trust me. Mm-hmm. I think God is saying that to other people too. Just let go and trust me. I have something new in store for you. Yep. And how exciting is that? And not only is it just for you to consume, but to help create. God is calling us to be creators with him and not just consume.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of the quote I shared yesterday that, sometimes the biggest obstacle to the great thing God wants to do next is the great thing God did last. Yeah. I think there's a lot of churches, they were on paper at least killing it before COVID. And then COVID happened and now they're just trying to get back to it, and they can't see the future because they're so stuck on the great thing God did last that they can't possibly imagine the great thing God is wanting to do next. Mm-hmm. And what we've kept coming back to again in this conversation is just the need to get in the presence of God in prayer.
Which I think is just the perfect for Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think just taking some time to get in the presence of God and maybe just ask God, what is an old way of thinking that is keeping me from a new way of living? Yeah. What is an old way of thinking that is keeping me from a new way of living? And God, even as good as that old way might have been or was, God, I'm willing to let that go so that I can step into the future and into the great thing that you want to do next. Because God will never lead you into a new way of living and let you remain in an old way of thinking.
Ooh, I think you need to say that again.
Right? God will never lead you into a new way of living and let you remain in an old way of thinking.
I got to write that down.
This guy, because before you do anything, you think, right? Mm-hmm. We're thinking beings before we're doing beings.
Absolutely.
So people they don't think before they act. No, we all think before we act. I mean, in Scripture it says, as a man thinks, he is. Mm-hmm. As a man thinks, he does. Mm-hmm. We think before we do. So if you want to change what you do, you need to change how you think. Yeah. You want to change the future.
Change how you think.
You got to change your mindset.
Jesus, where are you shifting my thinking?
Yeah, where are you shifting my thinking? And that's hard. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard when you find yourself in the midst of a holy shift. I had to do that.
I like that.
Holy shift.
Wow.
Hold on. There was Eric said this. I think presence is going to be essential for this Web3 idea of community. Even the developers of Metaverse have identified the importance presence plays in community and connection. Totally. I mean, and this is coming from someone, because I know this guy. He works at Meta. He's best friends with Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh my gosh.
No, but he does work at Meta, and I think he's absolutely right, though. Mm-hmm. I mean, that presence is going to be so valuable. And that's why it's like, how do we get people from digital to physical?
Yes, that's the goal.
Like, my hope, if you're listening to this, as much as I love that you might find this helpful and resourceful, I hope you keep coming and tuning in, and I hope it continues to serve you. But my real hope is you'll find a group of people to do life with.
And to talk about
these. Like, take this conversation to somebody else. Yeah.
And sit with them.
Yep.
And let's dive into it even more.
Totally.
And talk about, where is Jesus shifting your thinking?
Yep.
How are you relying on the Holy Spirit right now? Those are conversations to have with people that will be so life-giving and life-changing.
Yeah, because you want to know, like, one of the worst places to be in is when you're experiencing a shift in your life and you're doing that alone. Yeah. A shift in isolation has got to be the worst thing. Yeah. Because you have no one to say, is this normal?
Yeah.
Am I crazy here?
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people like, am I crazy? They're like, you're not crazy.
Yeah, and we're like, thank you.
And we're like, oh, I'm not crazy. Okay. Like, even after church yesterday, somebody came to me. They were from Sacramento, and they were visiting, and they've really been struggling with the church. He actually used to be a pastor, left the ministry, has really struggled with the church, and decided to come yesterday. And at one point in the message, I was like, I don't know if anyone can relate. The church is changing, evolving. And they were like, we felt seen. We felt like we're not crazy. I haven't told you that. It was a really cool story.
That's really cool.
And there's something about community and presence, to your point, Eric, that allows us to be, like, you need to be seen.
Yeah.
And you also need those times you go, am I crazy? And people are like, yeah, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Because
sometimes we are.
Sometimes we're just crazy. And you need people that are like, hey, you're about to walk off the edge, buddy.
Let me pull you back.
Let's bring you back, because I love you. Yeah. But we need presence of people. Presence is power. And so I do think, again, it's like, if it starts digital, great. Enjoy it for what it is, but don't try and think it can be something that it can't be. Yeah. Right? Like, don't think digital can replace presence.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's both. It's both. But the end game, I think, is still physical.
End game.
Presence. End game. We're watching Marvel right now in order, from beginning to end.
End
game is next. We're about to end it.
Oh, I'm so nervous.
Jenna,
I know what happens.
You'll still cry.
You'll
still cry when Iron Man dies.
What if people haven't watched it?
If you haven't seen it by now, you don't care.
I can't believe you just said that.
I regret nothing. All right, let me look at one more thing. Eric Dupree said, have to sign off, but I love this topic. Thank you for leading us in this conversation. Eric, thank you for joining us. Thanks for signing on. In fact, thank you, everyone, for signing on today. I hope there was something that you grabbed a hold of today, but let's leave you with that question. What is one area of old way of thinking that needs to change in order for you to enter into a new way of living?
That's good.
Take some time. Maybe at lunch, maybe tonight, when you put the kids down or you close your laptop, and just be still and ask, God, is there an old way of thinking that you're trying to change in my life to bring me into a new way of living? And God, I'll give you that. I'll surrender it to you. I'll lay it down. I'll lay it down, because I want what you have for me next more than what I had in the past.
And don't let it end there. Then talk about it with somebody else.
Yep. Get some presence in your life. Get some people in your life. Have those conversations. We go further, faster together. But let's spend some time in the presence of God, asking that question: what is an old way of thinking that needs to change for me to enter into a new way of living? I think it was a pretty good conversation.
So good. So good. And glad you all were here to join us. Hope it was helpful. Keep talking about it.
Keep talking about it, and we'll figure out those audio problems next week. But thanks for hanging with us anyways. And for those that are tuning in on the podcast later, thank you for tuning in as well. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and be a part of these future conversations every Monday at 12:15 p.m. here on YouTube or on the podcast, wherever you subscribe to podcasts. But until next time, until next time, what?
We'll see you next Monday.
We'll see you later. See you guys.